to come before you today to provide you an update on our procurement for our residential solid waste and recycling collection services. This is a large contract that impacts many of Orange County citizens, so we wanted to make sure the board has an opportunity to understand how we're moving this procurement forward, and also so that we have the opportunity to hear any feedback from you as we're working on this contract. There we go. So this provides the presentation outline, this slide. With me today is Mitch Kessler with Kessler Consulting, and Mr. Kessler will provide an update on the current state of solid waste collection industry and provide some background about how things are going today. And I'll address the other issues, including background key issues and how we're approaching the procurement. So as you're fully aware, the county provides services to about 230,000 residential units. The county is currently divided into 5 collection zones, and we have 3 different firms that provide once per week garbage collection in carts, once per week recycling collection in carts, once per week yard waste. We collect up to 3 cubic yards, or about 3 washing machine size piles of yard waste, once per week bulky waste, about the same size. And all our trucks right now do have GPS tracking on most of the vehicles. This map shows what the current zones look like. Our current contract was bid in 2015, and as Mr. Kessler will mention, that's important to understand because pricing and the price of the solid waste collection has changed since that time. This shows the 5 zones. When we solicited this bid, we limited each hauler to only bidding on 2 zones, and the prices were set in 2015. They've had an annual inflation adjustment annually since then, and that contract at that time was for the period 2016, and the contract expires December 31st, 2025. So where are we right now? This graph, I think, provides a good representation of the challenges we had at the end of last year after 2 hurricanes and all of the ups and downs and the complaints that we had. We believe that things have generally settled down. We worked with our haulers to provide consistent service. With 230,000 customers, we have 4 services a week, 52 weeks a year. That's 48 million opportunities to provide service. And over the last fiscal year, we received a little more than 32,000 complaints. That's a complaint ratio of less than of around 0.07%. So again, we think we have a pretty good complaint ratio. Could always be better, but again, just to let you know, it's a factor we continue to track and are very much aware of. The new contract needs to start on January 1st, 2026. So we need to make sure that we complete the competitive procurement in time so that we can have a smooth transition and rate adoption. The haulers are going to have to buy new trucks, and we have to make sure that we have the rates adopted in time to start the new contract. We want to make sure that we balance optimal service with customer costs. We want to provide a consistent quality of service. We want to try to minimize complaints. And we also want to consider service frequency, similar as we did in the last time we bid this contract. We had a couple of different options on service. And our biggest concern is we want to make sure that we meet our customer expectations. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Mr. Kessler to provide you some update on the solid waste industry.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. It's great to be here. Earlier I was going to say good morning, but it's definitely afternoon now. So you've had a long day, and we're going to cut to the chase. So David talked a little bit about our firm. We specialize in working with governments and counties in solid waste issues only, particularly procurement. So we're here to answer any questions that you might have later. Be happy to do it. I just want to acknowledge my project manager, Bethany Jewell, who really does all the heavy lifting on this project, working with David and his great staff. So I'm going to briefly talk about some current trends we're seeing both nationally and in Florida, so you can see how that fits into what's occurring for you here. One clear trend is towards automation. That's been happening over the last 10 years. You've already moved in that direction. That's a very powerful direction that the industry is going, mainly because of the safety issues of getting out of a truck, the efficiency of routing, and insurance and liability issues. The second trend that's pretty strong is a labor shortage. We know that in almost everything that we do these days. There's not enough people to do the work that is out there. In this field, how that comes home to roost and how it leads eventually to price increasing is skilled labor. Mechanics are in short supply. Drivers are in short supply. There's not enough, and that's something we're seeing. Equipment manufacturing delays, everybody knows about the supply chain issue. The other thing, in addition to the supply chain issue that's delaying and leaving the time that David has wisely chosen to make this procurement work, is the delays that are occurring because of the demand. There's a lot of people changing vehicles now and changing vehicles more frequently to improve service. There's also a trend towards contract transparency and accountability. That's something that we think is important for all of our clients. It's important here in Orange County. So it's the transparency in the contract and being clear. I'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide, but we're incorporating that into the contract, working with the county staff. And lastly, the trend is technology advancements. It's occurring in everything we do. That's certainly happening with vehicles. So I'll talk briefly about some of those technology advancements that are happening nationally. Again, many of these are being incorporated into your agreement. So the first one is fleet advancements. We're seeing advancements in fuels such as compressed natural gas, electric vehicles, biodiesel. It's all a coming trend, and that's what you'll see more and more of. Safety improvements. It's essential. It's one of the more dangerous industries out there. It's currently rated 7th out of all industries in the country for accidents and fatalities. So that's something we're seeing improvement in through some of the safety design that's going to the vehicles. And then a main one is what we're calling it camera technology, but that really is real-time visuals of what's happening in front of each home and what's happening at that truck, what's happening at that stop. Routing software efficiencies, as the world's becoming more technically oriented, how to get places is done by the magic of artificial intelligence and programs. Service performance verification software, that is going to be a new addition to this RFP, and that is going to allow better tracking of what's occurring in various ways. It provides real-time data. It provides better tools to know what's occurring out there. And lastly, excuse me, is container monitoring, which really focuses on minimizing the amount of contamination going into your garbage cans and the recycling cans to make sure the right product is going in each of those containers. Lastly, for me, and near and dear to your heart, is price. And what I want to mention about price is the big picture is simple. For the reasons we talked about, the price is going up. There's one thing I feel very comfortable guaranteeing you, and I know staff has talked about this to you individually. Prices will be going up. And the question on the table is how much? Well, there's many variables, and comparing those prices to other jurisdictions is not an apples-to-apples comparison. So my point isn't to focus on this chart. It's to really address what are the major causes. I've mentioned labor and benefits going up. We've talked about trucks. Trucks are going way up. 10 years ago, the cost of trucks has almost doubled. Fuel keeps fluctuating. Inflation, we all know what that's been occurring. So what kind of increase is a logical question of what we could see? Well, we're seeing, looking around the state, not even going national, but just in the state, the ranges have been in the last few years anywhere between 50 to 150%. That's what I think you'll see here. I'm hoping it's in the lower end of that, but you don't know. What are some of the factors? Local competition. What level of service is happening? The type of service, the contract requirements, the density of your homes. All of those factors, particularly competition, will impact what we get back. So what do we do to minimize the increase? Well, there's a number of things. One is detailed roles and responsibilities in the RFP that's being procured by David and his staff. The more details that are in there, the more clear responsibilities, the less chance there is for error. Another one would be eliminating the gray areas in a contract. There's a lot of contract improvements that everybody's working on this project together feels need to occur, and we're putting those in the document. A better agreement approves the efficiency and effectiveness and gives you the control mechanisms you need to guarantee good service to your residents. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to David. We'll be here to answer any questions that come up.
Thank you. Some of the key issues and the factors we're considering as we develop the RFP are we get a lot of feedback from our customers through the call center. We receive more than 200 calls a day. We receive feedback from the commissioners' offices regularly about what they would like to see done better as part of our waste management program. And so generally what we hear about is folks want to have waste and recycling collected on schedule. So we want to look at how do we make sure that happens. We want to minimize missed pickups and make sure missed pickups get remedied. We also have some problems with the carts being damaged by the haulers or falling apart. And then also another big factor we hear about is the occasional large or non-conforming piles, those orphan piles that are on the curb or in front of people's houses or in front of that house where somebody just moved out of. So we've got feedback from the board, we got feedback from residents. We also solicited feedback from the industry. We had an industry day where we went before all of the potential proposers and said, this is what we're thinking. What do you think we could do better? What's the trends in the industry? As Mitch said, they all said labor challenges. That's their number one problem. Equipment and their other costs, inflation, keep going up. The other thing that they made sure that we're aware of is higher levels of service will result in a higher price. So the more that we ask the haulers to do, we will end up paying for it. So with all of that input put together, what we're thinking about moving forward with, or the way we're moving forward with our collection program would be, we're going to continue the cart collection of residential recycling and garbage. We think that works, it works well, and for a number of reasons that Mitch just mentioned. We're going to continue to collect up to 3 cubic yards of yard waste at each week in front of each household. That meets most of our customers' needs most of the time. And we're going to continue to require the haulers to debag at the curb, empty the plastic bags at the curb, because that allows us to produce a recyclable compost or recyclable mulch. If you keep the bags in it, you can't recycle it. We're going to continue to collect up to 3 cubic yards of bulky trash each week. We're going to continue to collect 4 tires, which we have for many, many years. We're going to continue to collect white goods at the curb and continue to collect other bulky waste at the curb. Once each week. That is a relatively high level of standard of service in the state of Florida, and again, that has always been impacting on our price. We're also, as Mitch highlighted, that positive service verification. We're going to build that into the contract to make sure that the haulers are using GPS technology and other applications, so we know that material is getting picked up. Some changes we're making that will affect the contractors in some way is, one, we want to have a 7-year term of agreement instead of a 10-year term. The reason for the 7-year term is that's how long the trucks last. So we want to make the contract match the lifespan of the truck. If you run the trucks for more than 7 years, you start to see more breakdowns, more spills, more leaks. And we want to have written into the contract that the contractor will assist us with diversion and recycling. We're going to put some flexibility in there to potentially have pilot tests or other things over the life of the agreement so we can try new ideas. We're going to require that the trucks are appropriate to the collection area, meaning smaller trucks for alleys and other tight spaces, and require each contract to have a claw truck in each zone to help pick up the bulky wastes that are sometimes challenging. We're going to have the contractor manage the carts. That's going to shift cost from the county to the contractor, but if that person is breaking carts, we want them to be responsible for repairing them. If they need to keep them in inventory. We don't want to be the middleman between the cart manufacturer and the contractor. We want to have one company can service up to 2 zones. We think that that is a fair way to distribute the work. We keep the requirement for compressed natural gas trucks, but also allow alternate fuel truck to be bid, electric or any other alternate fuel. And then we have in here escalating accountability easy for me to say, escalating accountability for performance problems, with the idea being if they perform poorly, there will be an escalating penalty scale. The other couple issues we're considering, or we are including in the RFP, are an option for garbage collection for once a week or twice a week. What we're considering there is twice a week may offer some positives and some negatives, but the positives it would offer could be improved resiliency, improve service to the customer. And also, we have a challenge with recycling in that we have a very high contamination rate in our recycling. And so we want to see if there's the opportunity for this twice per week collection to help spread out, people would not be using their recycle cart as their second garbage cart. But as I mentioned earlier, more service, increased costs. So we would have to then be able to do a cost-benefit analysis to see if it makes sense and consider other factors. But if we ask for the price in the RFP, then we have the price for evaluation. We're going to include what we're calling directed collection. As I mentioned, each of the haulers is going to be required to have a claw truck. And so what this directed collection will offer us is we are going to write into the contract right now that we have the ability to tell the hauler, go pick up a pile. We will pay you per cubic yard for what you pick up. But we want to be able to have that discretion and be able to provide that direction in our contract that they can go out and pick up the oversized piles or pick up the non-conforming setouts or those orphan loads that sometimes get dumped someplace. What we have to be very careful about this is again, we put this option in there. We have this tool in our toolbox. Well, we want to make sure that we manage expectations and we have means of cost recovery built into our processes. So again, this is something where we're putting the service into the contract, and we're going to have to continue to work on how we're going to address the costs that service incurs. Importantly, we're going to pursue an RFP versus a bid approach, and I'll talk about that in a couple of slides. And we're going to look to rebalance our zones by having 6 zones instead of 5. This takes us from having the size of the zones from being closer to 60,000 down to closer to 45,000. Again, it's a much more manageable size. We've had 5 zones in Orange County for many, many cycles of the contract, and we think this will allow us to rebalance it and offer some areas where we can more closely manage the size. And also, you may notice the areas that are faster growing are a little bit smaller than some of the zones that aren't growing so much, so that over time, the zones will all be about the same size. So what is our procurement approach? As I mentioned, we're looking for a request for proposal instead of a straight bid. We don't want to hire the cheapest bid offered. We know the cost is important, but we want to be able to consider the qualifications of the firm, the qualifications of the assigned personnel, what is their staffing, and what is their equipment that are dedicated to the project. The number of people and the number of pieces of equipment, the size and the distribution of equipment is very important because that's how the service gets provided. It comes down to a person in a truck. We need to make sure there's enough people and there's enough trucks. We're going to have the hauler tell us, as part of their proposal, how are you going to provide this positive service verification? We know that there's tools out there. We know that there's software. And again, how are they also going to look at resiliency, customer service? Overall, the idea is to have a best value evaluation instead of a lowest price evaluation. This slide you have seen before, or a slide similar to this. This is how we present the MSBU and the cost to the customer every year. And you see how our current price to the customer as the MSBU is $290 a year. And this is how the different components build up into the price that the customer pays. On average, our residents pay $161.94, or that's the average cost of the 5 zones. Each resident pays $161.94. That's about 56% of the bill that they pay annually. We know that that's going to go up with this new contract. Disposal is about 21% of their current MSBU. We know that that's going to increase as our tipping fees increase. Administration should stay about the same. We anticipate recycling to stay about the same. Of course, we'll know more, like I said, when the proposals for the public-private partnership for the new MRF open up. Carts, on our accounting, the cart price will go down, but we're going to roll that into the collection price that we pay the hauler. Of course, reserve stabilization will be about the same, but as we expect with the trend in the industry, the trend in the state, we're expecting there to be a higher rate to the individual households. Our timeline, we're working on the procurement documents now. We want to release the RFP in the first quarter of next year. We want to receive the proposals by the second quarter. This gives us part of the second quarter and third quarter to evaluate proposals, to anticipate any hiccups in the procurement process. and be able to make a recommendation of award ask the board to make a recommendation, we'll make a recommendation, ask the board to make award at the end of calendar year 2024. That'll give us 24 months for the haulers to buy trucks, hire people, get all of the issues squared away so we can start new service on January 1st, 2026. So in summary, what we want to do is keep much of the same type of service with contractual improvements. We want to make revisions to improve service and accountability on the part of the hauler. We want to have 6 zones instead of 5 to keep our zones a good manageable size. We're asking for that option for twice per week collection so that we can evaluate and analyze that as part of the review process. We're going to include that directed services so that we get pickups of these orphan piles. And then finally, we are pursuing an RFP versus a bid approach. So again, it's a best value evaluation. So with that, that's my presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gregory. There are questions. We'll start with Commissioner Wilson.
Thank you so much. It's actually just more of a comment. We got a great briefing, and obviously this is, we're trying to kind of keep up with the growth and changes in the industry, and I just want to reinforce that I think that this particular type of service we offer is so different, and it's frustrating to some extent for me as an environmentalist to see that we don't do anything to incentivize good behavior in decreasing the amount of waste. And so if there's any possibility of building that into the RFP process, that there can be some kind of incentivization, like if you are somebody who does have to pay more for asking for a second card because you just create more waste, or if we do go to 2 a week on something, make it the recycling. So people will think, well, maybe I should rinse out that container and put it out since I have another chance to having something picked up. I just keep thinking if we bake those things into cost savings, people will really get on board with trying to be better citizens in what they're putting into our landfill. I think a lot of times they do what's convenient. And so, the amount of water we each use, we get charged for what that is. And if my family, turns off the water while they're brushing their teeth, then we get some money back in our pocket for that. We should try to figure out how to bake that in to our collections RFP in order to see if there's some savings we can provide. Thank you.
Thanks.
Commissioner Moore.
I was thinking something similar what she was saying, because there really is no penalty. And we've tried the positive approach, when you hear that your neighborhood is being rejected, week after week because we're not complying. So I would be curious if there's some best practices to help us be better with our trash. And then when you showed us that chart of the other areas and the increases, it's obvious we're going to be looking at a large increase. Have you thought through any kind of marking or notification or education? Should we do public, more than just a public hearing here? Because, if people all of a sudden hear their bill is going to be doubled, and we've gone through this season of very poor service by our providers, that's going to be hard to take, and they're going to be down here upset with us. So I wish you would do some amount of engagement so that people understand what we're facing.
And I think having a long lead time will certainly help us be able to put some information out as we're developing the pricing, yes.
And then if there's a piece like Commissioner Wilson said, to reduce costs because you do better with your recycling, that might be some incentive, because certainly people aren't doing that. We see that over and over and over. I get problems with cans everywhere in Bear Country, and so that's a conversation for another day. We had a briefing, but this is a difficult subject because we're looking at large increases. Right.
And we welcome the ideas, sometimes they're hard to work through, but we welcome.
All right, Commissioner Uribe.
Okay, so I also want to follow up because, I've had quite a bit of difficulties in my zone. And it's going to be hard to explain to our residents, the increase, and there's already a disappointment of lack of services as it stands. I know we have talked about incentivizing and penalizing in the past because they do it in other places. It's hard, but you talk about a GPS, right? And a lot of times when, especially during pickup, after the hurricane, they would say, we went there, and their GPS would show it, but what was happening, they would pick up one side of the road, not the other, and their response was, we picked up, you know. I wonder if we can look at, you know, every deputy now has a camera. I mean, we need to have better accountability than just a GPS, because if it weren't for what I've been through, including my WWE tossing of cans and so forth that's happened to me, we wouldn't even have a clue, you know? And I worry also because underserved areas, yeah, there is a lack of education on understanding, and I see all your mailers that come through, and I'm proud to be a good recycler. I wash all my cans and rinse everything out and don't contaminate, but it's a difficult hill to climb up. It really is, and we've attempted to do that, and I get so frustrated when I drive through my neighborhood and I just see people just dumping trash and recycling and so forth. But I don't know, and you guys have tried, but I really think, and I know you tried even in my neighborhood, the notices, like you're a good recycler and you're a bad recycler. But my biggest, I would like to see some sort of community component to this, because people have to understand overall what's happening and what's driving these costs. Because what they think is, you know, I always, and David, you and I, everybody expect a few things when they pay their taxes: police and fire, and have their trash picked up, right? Those are like the basic necessities that people think of when they pay taxes. And it's gonna be hard for them to understand. But reasonably, this makes sense, you know? Things have gone up. We can't continue, but what we can do is say, we're gonna have a higher threshold of expectation, because if we're gonna pay more, we're gonna expect more too. And I really worry about those zone areas where we've had problems, and I commend you and your team for getting on it, but we've gotta turn that idea that we're being perceived as. And also, I've asked you to look at county right-of-ways, because what we're seeing in a lot of communities, and you've shared with me, well, if the houses are on the left, that's all they pick up, even though they dump it on the right, which is a right-of-way of Orange County, so it's right there, they won't pick it up. And also, you know, what I would love to see is more penalization on these apartments that evict and just throw everything on the side of the road, or throw it on the back in the right-of-way. And there's no accountability for that. There has to be better when it comes to that. And there's a particular street that I always get on you, where the apartment complex knows they don't want it at their entrance. They've actually created a back door to dump everything in the back. And so, and that's not good. And then also, maybe we could also squeeze some of the commercial properties. You again helped me. A dumpster was literally left on a county road in my district.
For a year.
Actually, it was technically Commissioner Scott's district, because it was just across the street. It was on the west side of the road as opposed to the east side. But can you imagine? And those things cost upwards of $6,000, right? Dumped it on the side of the road and became the community dumpster. That's insane. Like you even said, that's a new one for me, Commissioner. That is absolutely insane. I think we've got to hold some accountability in it. And it kind of makes sense. A commercial dump, they dropped it, probably forgot, never picked it up, and it became the community trash bin. But I think we need a squeeze on these commercial properties, these multifamily properties. We've got to find some more accountability on that. Because what we tend to see, and it's already bad enough, we do a lot of neighborhood cleanups and things like that. It's already bad enough on the lack of respect on just littering as a whole. It's so discouraging to just drive down the road. I know I did a community cleanup, and I was so frustrated because they had McDonald's, but they threw their ketchup packets first, then their fry package, then the wrapper for the burger, and then the bag with the napkins, you know? And I'm like, you could at least thrown it all together. It would have made it so much easier for me to pick up. But it's difficult. It's difficult, but I commend you for always taking our feedback and trying to do better and trying to get that accountability. But I really would like to see the cameras, because we really, you know, I can drive around town and I'll say I went there, but was I effective when I was there is really the question.
And-
Thank you.
And again, as Mitch mentioned, that's the adopting more technology, and the requirement for more technology is I think, right in agreement with what you're saying of holding them accountable. Make sure they go down the street.
Yeah, and we're paying for it.
Yep.
I mean, we're paying for it, so it's not,
Yes,
they're
ma'am.
not doing us a favor, we're paying for it, and if they want more, we expect more too. Thank you,
Yes,
Dave.
ma'am.
Commissioner Scott?
Thank you, Mayor. Just with the pickup, you talked about it moving from potentially one day to twice a day pickup. Could you also maybe look at, Commissioner Wilson kind of mentioned it, where I remember you guys had the green and the orange bins when recycling first started, and we had more mixed-use recycle than we had paper, and so we'd obviously put that in the orange one and use it as a second one. But I remember at some point, either from our neighbors, we wound up having two of the green boxes, and it just got picked up. And so what I'm saying is potentially having a second cart, a mechanism to have a second cart, so that, maybe we don't increase the cost, but if there are two carts there, they're going to pick them up and not have to come a second day. And so maybe that's a cheaper option to meet the area where I have a lot of trash or a lot of recyclables one week. And so because I cleaned up something, now I'm using that second bin, and so they still pick it up, but they don't have to necessarily come back another day. So just something to think about. But other than that, I'm good. Thank you.
Commissioner Bonilla?
Yeah, I just want to validate some of the comments that the other commissioners were making. I have constituents who contact my office, and they say that on the street, they picked up some of the trash cans, but not all of them, and not his. So that's happened. And I was driving behind someone one time that was also throwing McDonald's stuff out the window. It was like one thing at a time. I'm like, what are they doing? And yeah, I just wish I had taken a picture of the license plates, and I don't know what if there's a fine for that or what, littering, but yeah, definitely it's disgusting. And unfortunately, it happens a lot. People just driving down the road. I mean, in front of my house, we're always picking up trash because people just throw stuff out the window. Besides, the time when they actually threw their trash in front of my house because it wasn't being picked up. So, I just want to definitely validate everything that the other commissioners were saying. We've been having this issue for a long time. It's still happening. And we get constituents that really are upset, and they're asking, why aren't these, vendors, these contractors, why aren't they being fined? Why aren't there penalties? Where are the consequences? These are the questions that they're asking and the things that I hear all the time. Thanks.
Commissioner Gomez-Cordero?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, David, for the presentation. I just wanted to ask you, that extra zone that you're going to put, I think we talked about that, but if you can repeat it just for the audience to hear, the people watching, where exactly is that going to be? How are you going to, put that extra zone that you're going to put? It would be, what are you, considering, like,
If I could. So we tried to create the zones and use major highways and major geographic dividers to establish what the zones are. So, as you can see, most of these are along highways or major roads. And so trying to find a distribution where they're similar in size or going to grow into a certain size. And that's how we're doing the layout. Again, it is purely trying to find a good dividing lines, and the good dividing lines being generally the highways.
okay, balance it? Okay, thank you.
All right, with that, I don't see any other questions or comments. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
a very comprehensive
And-
presentation. We look forward to the changes and improvements. Hopefully that will come as a result of them.
Thank you.
With that, Commissioners, we do not have any other items on the agenda for this afternoon. We hope all of you have a happy and joyous Thanksgiving holiday. We stand adjourned.